Hey leader, and welcome to episode number 321 of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Baratongue Advisors. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll enjoy our content and become a subscriber. Know that you can also watch all of our episodes over on our YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed there as well. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, thank you so much. And if it's made an impact on your life, it would mean the world to me if you leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever app you listen to podcasts through. That really does help us to grow our audience and reach more leaders, so thank you in advance for that. And every week I like to highlight one of the reviews that you've left, and today I'll highlight Cam Capelli's review. He said this, there's nothing like it. Have you ever wished that you could meet the leaders who inspire you? That's what this podcast is all about. L3 interviews some of the best leaders around and gives you a chance to meet them. The content is usually extremely valuable and practical. Thank you so much, Cam. Love and appreciate you. Well, in today's episode, you'll hear my interview with Brian Moran. If you're unfamiliar with Brian, let me just tell you a little bit about him. He is the CEO and founder of The Execution Company. He's a highly respected expert and accomplished executive who has developed a well-versed business perspective from his vast experience in consumer products, healthcare, food service, automotive, and transportation, and professional service sectors. Brian is the co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The 12-Week Year, a program developed to empower individuals and companies to achieve more in 12 weeks than what others accomplish in 12 months. I love that. The 12-Week Year philosophy and training program has been implemented worldwide with industry-leading companies including Allstate, BBVA, MassMutual, Medtronic, Merrill Lynch, Nationwide, Paycor, and Papa John's. Prior to launching the Execution Company, Brian had leadership positions within PepsiCo, UPS, Sen Delaney Management Consultants, and National Automotive Corporation. Coupling his corporate experience with his entrepreneurial drive, Brian also co-founded Bio Inc., a health services provider specializing in wellness and medical surveillance, performing on-site medical testing. A trusted strategic advisor and visionary, Brian volunteers his time to mentor promising entrepreneurs to refine, implement, and execute their business plans, and his charity work includes Susan G. Komen and CBMC. And in our conversation, you'll hear us cover his whole framework of the 12-week year, and you'll learn how you can get more done in 12 weeks than most can in a year. And of course, we take him through the lightning round, so you're going to love this interview. But before we get into it, just a few announcements. This episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast is sponsored by Baratongue Advisors. The financial advisors at Baratongue Advisors help educate and empower clients to make informed financial decisions. You can find out how Baratongue Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future by visiting their website at baratongueadvisors.com. That's BERATUNG advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Baratongue Advisors, LPL Financial, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. I also want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. My wife, Laura, and I got our engagement and wedding rings through Henny Jewelers, and we just had a wonderful experience. And not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, for every engaged couple that comes in, they give them a book to help them prepare for marriage, and we just love that. So if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. And with all that said, let's dive right in. Here's my conversation with Brian Moran. Well, hey, Brian, it's an honor to be here with you and have this conversation with you. And why don't we just start off with you just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, you bet, Doug. Great to be with you. My name's Brian Moran. I'm a New York Times bestselling author, and my business partner and I work with individuals and organizations to really drive higher performance. And everything we do is with really an eye towards helping people execute more effectively. Doug, we figured out a long time ago that they all have great ideas. They all have resources. What matters is what you implement. And so that's our focus. It's been our focus for years and, at every level. So we have people from every walks of life, virtually every industry, every business. And, we work with people on their personal goals as well. So the things we're talking about are universal concepts that apply equally in your personal life as they do your business life.
Yeah, and your framework, as I was mentioning before our interview, I actually became aware of it because of one of our L3 community members read your book, The 12-Week Year, and reads it every year and swears by it and says it has made her, 10 times more productive. And so I think it's a great framework. So that's exactly what I want to dive into in our conversation. I want to actually talk about two of your books. One you just came out with in December of 2021 called Uncommon Accountability. And can you just tell us a little bit about why did you write that book and what do you want readers to get out of it?
Yeah, that book came about because we had, there's a couple chapters in the 12-Week Year on accountability, and Michael and I, my co-author business partner, have a very different view of accountability. And we've been working with it for a couple decades now and found that it's not only enlightening for people, but it's incredibly powerful. And so people had asked for more, and we had more to say on it. So our publisher was asking for something. So that's the new one. Uncommon Accountability, a radical new approach to greater success and fulfillment. And it's really helping people understand this fundamental concept that is really, I think, critical to living your best life. And so sort of debunking what accountability is and isn't, and then helping people understand really how to apply it in a way that's powerful.
Yeah, and I'd be curious, it seems like you split the two into two things. One, accountability on an individual level, and then accountability at a team level or a leadership level. Talk about, and you can bring in some of the 12-week framework in here as well. Can you talk about what you found to be the best way to get accountability in our lives to produce the results that we're going through? In L3 leadership, we have mastermind groups that meet together on a consistent basis, and we try to do weekly check-in calls with an accountability partner. But you lay out a framework. Can you just lay out that process of effectiveness? It may actually change the way we do everything in our mastermind group.
Well, first and foremost, it's how you think about accountability. And most people have experienced accountability as consequences, right? I mean, everywhere you hear that word in society, it's affiliated with bad behavior, poor performance, negative consequences. And we watch the news tonight, and they're going to talk about somebody who did something they weren't supposed to do, and then they're going to hold them accountable. And so that's the way we experience it in society. That's the prevailing view of it. And yet I think most people know intuitively that somehow accountability is important for success in life. And so as we looked at those concepts and how they played out, our insight was accountability is not consequences. And instead accountability is really ownership. And it's based on the concept of free will choice. The fact that we always have choice. No matter what situation we're in, we have choice. Now, we may not like the choices we have. I like to joke April 15th, you got a choice of paying your taxes or going to prison, right? Personally, I don't care for either of them, but you have choice. And so it's that recognition of that choice and then taking ownership of those choices in the areas of life that matter. And typically when we're struggling in an area, it has to do with a lack of ownership, right? We're waiting for someone or something to change. And so when we take ownership of those situations, we take ownership of our choices, it creates different outcomes. And so from a leader standpoint, how you think about accountability then affects how you engage your people, right? Every organization we've worked in, we've heard people talk about holding others accountable. And I would argue you can hold a bag of groceries or a baby, but when we're talking about holding someone accountable, when we really look into that, it's really about creating a negative consequence when they don't do what we want them to do. And that's not accountability, that's consequences. And consequences play a role, but you never get discretionary effort with negative consequences. You get just enough to stop the consequences. So how you think about accountability affects everything from your health and your relationships, your income, your career, your fulfillment, whether you're a solopreneur, whether you're just applying it in your personal goals, or whether you're leading an organization. So
on the individual level, because I want to hit both of these, I believe in the 12-week, you actually have a weekly agenda for holding ourselves accountable or, for ownership. Can you run us through that agenda? And, was your recommendation to do that with an accountability partner every week, a team? What would your encouragement be?
Yeah, so we talk about a weekly accountability meeting where you're meeting with a few peers, just talking about how you're doing against your goals, and most importantly, around your actions, because we control the actions, not the outcomes. And so how well, the 12-week year is all about execution. As I said earlier, it's not enough to know, right? You've got to implement. And so that conversation with your peers is really more about the activity, the execution, than it is the outcomes. But having those conversations, those candid conversations with a few other people once a week, again, creates accountability self and some encouragement and some challenge from others. That said, though, there have to be some things in place, right? You have to, your goals have to be connected to some motivation, right? Your why, your longer term vision. You also need to be very clear on the actions, which requires a tactical plan, not a conceptual plan. And most individuals, most organizations plan conceptually, not tactically. And so, in order for those conversations to be meaningful and impactful, there's some supporting structures that need to be in place.
So, yeah, when it comes to actions, I think that's really, really incredible. So if I'm meeting with you and I say, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds in the next 12 weeks, so would you recommend me saying, okay, the actions I'm going to take there, I'm going to work out 5 times a week. I'm going to eat healthy at least 5 or 6 days out of the week. And then those accountability calls would just be, hey, did you work out those 5 days? If we looked at another subject, sales, did you make the 5 sales calls? Is that how you would structure it and have the questions asked of you in that meeting?
Yes. So with the 12-week year, one of the things that we do is we track the results, but we score the execution. So if you're on the 12-week year, you're actually going to score your execution on a weekly basis. And again, the reason we do that is because that's the most powerful lead indicator you have. It's the greatest predictor of your future success. Did I do the things I said I need to do in order to accomplish the goal? And so in a weekly accountability group, we're going to talk about 2 things. We're going to talk about how we're doing against the goal. So if it's a weight loss, and I want to lose 12 pounds over the next 12 weeks, I'm 2 weeks in, where am I at? I've gained 2 pounds. I've lost 2 pounds, whatever it is, right? If it's sales and I'm going to do 120,000 or 120 million in the next 12 weeks, right? Where am I at against that goal? And then also, how well did I execute or how poorly did I execute the prior week? And so that'll be a score, but it also then you dig into, are there certain actions that you're not taking, that you're avoiding, that you're finding difficult? And if so, what's going to be different this week?
And so if that's at the individual level, is it the exact same thing, within an organization and holding your team accountable? During the day, I work at Light of Life Rescue Mission. We're a nonprofit in Pittsburgh. So I've been in the nonprofit space for a long time. Yeah. And I've found that in nonprofit space, a lot of nonprofits struggle with this idea of accountability because then in the business world, I feel like they're very ruthless on accountability. Can you talk about the best way leaders can utilize accountability within their teams?
Yeah. And so neither one of those work, by the way. When you say they're very ruthless in the business world, it's the same thing. They're ruthless with consequences. That's not creating accountability. In fact, the more ruthless you are, the more it damages the relationship, the more resentment it creates, the more sabotage it creates and passive resistance it creates. And yet that's the way leaders have been taught to manage, right? You really get after your people when they're not performing. And so, think about yourself and the last time someone did that to you. You don't come away feeling inspired to give your best. You want to give just enough to get that person to go away. And that's the problem with the consequence model. And when you talk about holding someone accountable, that's what we're talking about. And so we talk about scrub that notion, forget that, hold people capable. And it sounds like, well, that sounds semantics. It's not. It's subtly different, but at the same time profoundly different in that it's based on the understanding that I can't force someone to do something. Right? If you think about the way big organizations hold people accountable, it's with this notion that I can force you to do something, when in truth I can't. I might create a consequence that's so distasteful that you choose to do it, but that's where all that collateral damage comes in. And that's what you have in most companies. Or you get the opposite, which is kind of what you said in nonprofit is I find that so distasteful because I have volunteers. I don't feel like I can do that. So I don't confront at all. Right. And so accountability as ownership is still, from a leader standpoint, is still very confrontive, but it's not confrontive with consequences first. It's confronted with personal freedom and personal choice. Because whether I'm a volunteer in your organization or whether I'm a W-2 employee, I don't have to work there. I can choose to work somewhere else. And so as a leader, what I'm going to do, Doug, is when you're underperforming, I'm going to confront you with the fact that there are performance standards. I'm not going to lower the standard for you, but it's your choice whether or not you want to perform to that standard or not. And the consequences of you choosing to not perform are a set of consequences that you're choosing, which are going to be some sort of up to termination, right? It's just not a good fit. It doesn't make you a bad person, makes you a bad fit. On the other hand, if you choose to perform, there's a different set of consequences that follow that. Everything from recognition, bonuses, incentive pay, all kinds of, maybe even promotion. But in the end, as a leader, what I want to do is I want to confront you with your choice. Otherwise, what happens is the burden to perform becomes mine as the leader, which is not good. I mean, because it's your burden to perform, not mine. My job is just to help you and help you confront the reality of how you're doing and hold up a mirror and give you some coaching when you need it. But ultimately, you have to choose to do the things to be successful in the organization or not. And so in the end, you choose your consequences. And again, it's subtle, but it's profoundly different. It changes the conversation. It changes the relationship. It changes the results.
And is what you just shared pretty much that conversation you would have with an employee who may not be performing, or, is that with the accountability? Yeah.
Very similar to that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I want to talk a little bit, dive into more on how to be effective through the 12-week year. Again, I think this is brilliant. The book's called The 12-Week Year, and the tagline is how to get more done in 12 weeks than most do in a year, which is awesome. So talk about that book. Why did you write this book, and can people really get more done in 12 weeks than a year?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We'd been working with our clients on it, and we were going to a trade show as a vendor, Michael and I, and so kind of wondering what we were going to pass out and hand out at the booth. And we decided to write just a short format book, leave out all the fluff. And that was the precursor to the 12-week year. It was called Periodization, 12 Weeks to Breakthrough. And so we went down to Kinko's and self-published, right? We printed 100 books, sold them for $10 a pop, gave a few away. And from that, sold a couple 100,000 copies of that book. It literally changed our business, changed our life. And the crazy thing, Doug, was we wrote it in 12 weeks. But then Wiley came along, big publisher out of New York, and said, hey, they wanted to publish it, gave us an opportunity to expand it. And so it was really just documenting what we were doing with our clients. And early on, we started working with our clients specifically around what it takes to execute at a high level. And we figured out there's a set of disciplines and principles to do that. But we were doing it in the context of an annual environment because that's what everybody does, right? We set annual goals. We broke them down quarterly, monthly, and weekly. Same thing with the plans. And, we got good results, but we just felt like there was more. And we came across the concept of periodization, which was an athletic training process. And it had some tenets in it that we were able to extract and apply to a business setting and a personal setting. And one of those pieces was a shorter time frame. And so the 12-week year was created. And so our clients work in the context of every 12 weeks as a year. And there aren't 4 of those in the year. That's annualized thinking, right? It's all about mindset, getting out of that mindset that I can catch up. That's the problem with the annual environment. And people say, what's different with 90-day planning or quarterly planning? Well, a quarter is a fourth of a whole. And that's the mindset that we got to get away from, because you may catch up and hit the goal, but you can't recapture capacity you left on the table last week, last month, last quarter. And that's the difference between where people are performing what they're capable of. So you asked, is it possible for people to accomplish in 12 weeks what they would in 12 months? And we have thousands that have done it and are doing it. And it's not about working harder. It's not about working longer. It's not about taking everything you would do in 12 months and trying to cram it into 12 weeks. It's really being clear on the things that matter most and then being more consistent with them. And as we do that, it not only creates momentum and brings results online quicker, but it also reduces the stress.
And so let's start to break that down. One of the functions you talk about in the book is just vision, and why vision is so important. You just mentioned getting crystal clear on what matters most. What have you found about vision? And you talk in the book about an aspirational vision and then having a 3-year vision. What would your encouragement be to leaders today when it comes to vision, to getting clear on what matters? Yeah, the biggest thing is most leaders have probably worked on their departmental vision or their company vision. That's not where we start, because that's just part of my life. That's not so we start with, what do you want in your life? And we do that with everyone on the team, whether they're full-time or part-time, regardless of what their title or status is. And what do you want your life to look like 5, 10, 15 years in the future? What do you want it to look like 3 years from now? Because that's the why.
And then we look at the business or the career and say, okay, what do we need to do here in this department or this organization that helps you live that life, so that we connect the dots for the people about what they do Monday through Friday and how it helps them accomplish what they want in life. And that's really how you get an empowered, inspired workforce, is connecting those dots where people see that, okay, I do these calls, right, so that I can have this success here in my role. Why? So that I can live the life I want to live. From a material standpoint, from a confidence, self-image standpoint, from a family standpoint, all of that stuff matters. And so that vision, most people never do that work. The top performers sort of do it intuitively if they haven't done it on paper. But the real opportunity is to take people through it and get some clarity around that so that they can connect the dots and see how it fits. And in some cases it doesn't fit and people move on, and that's good for everyone.
Yeah. And once you have it, you talked about getting it down on paper. What do you encourage people to do once they have their vision in front of them? Should they review it, annually? Although I guess you discard that thinking, but review it every 12 weeks, every day.
Annually for us would be every 12 weeks. But the key is, it, Doug, the key is staying connected to it, right? Whether it's daily or at least once a week, but staying connected to it. I've got a little reminder in my Outlook to connect with it daily. And I've got mine printed on a 3x5 card, the aspirational on one side, the 3-year on the other. And so some days I read the whole thing. Some days I'll just pick an item or two and sort of mentally stand that ground, right? What's that enable me to do when I'm there that I can't do now, right? The more I mentally live into it, the easier it is for me to take action on it and really lean into it.
Yeah. And then, so you take your vision, now you have this aspirational vision, the 3-year vision, and then your encouragement is to break it down into 12-week goals. Can you talk to us about the process of goal setting and getting clear on the next 12 weeks?
Yeah. One of the challenges there is most people take on too much, and partly because they're doing annual plans, right? So it's like, hey, 12 months is a big span of time. And so one of the first things there is really deciding what kind of capacity you have to execute against goals. And so is one goal enough? Is 2 enough? When you start to get more than 3 in any one area, like your business, you're probably setting yourself up to struggle. So in an ideal world, what we would say, if it's your first 12-week year, 1 business or career goal, 1 personal goal. And the reason, Doug, is because we all have limited capacity. We have limited time. We have limited energy. We have limited intellect. It's not a slam. It's just a reality. And every time we take on one more thing, it really reduces the probability of us being great at anything pretty significantly. And so the 12-week year is really about being great at a few things versus being mediocre at a lot of things.
Yeah, and you made a statement in the book that there'll always be more opportunities than you can effectively pursue, which is basically what you just said. Can you tell me the framework you give leaders, or how you personally decide what to say yes to and what to say no to in your life? Because, as you said, I always throw way too much on my plate, and that's an incredibly challenge in my life. So,
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things. I mean, we find ourselves falling into that same trap, and we've been doing this and we wrote the book on it. So, just recognize that that's normal. But again, the success in life comes through focus. And so what if we just picked 1 or 2 areas and really nailed it? What might be different 12 weeks from now? Now we do that over a couple of 12-week years, and it literally is life-changing. And so the process of sorting through is really thinking about all the things I might take on as goals and just prioritize them. Hey, if I could only do 1, which one would that be? If I could only do 1 more, okay, let's just stop there. And if we did that, would we be celebrating at the end of 12 weeks? Because sometimes we throw all these goals in to hedge our bets. And by doing that, we're almost ensuring that we're not going to be successful on any of it because we're spread too thin. And so the challenge is, and it is a challenge, but on the front end to really think about, okay, if I could only do 1 of these things, which one would be most critical in terms that's aligned with my vision, my 3-year vision, my aspirational vision. And keeping it to 3 or less is ideal.
Okay, so now, a leader has their vision. They just set their 12-week goals for the first time. Now it actually, okay, that's all nice to have on paper, but now it's actually time to execute. Talk to us about process. Talk to us about time management and taking those 12-week goals and actually executing on those day to day? How do people optimize their day to day execution?
Yeah, one of those things is, and I sort of touched on this earlier, you've got to get tactical at the plan, right? Most plans are conceptual. If you don't get tactical, it's going to be really difficult for you to execute it because concepts don't execute, right? In sales, referrals, great concept. Cross-sell, great concept. Exercise, diet, great concepts. Those don't execute. And so you've got to get really granular and tactical. Once you do that, though, you know what matters most for the next 12 weeks. And with the 12-week year, all tactics, all actions have due dates, and they're by weeks. So some are one-time tactics. Like if I'm trying to lose weight, I'm going to order superfoods, in week 1. I don't need to order them every week or order them one time. A second tactic, though, is to take my superfoods daily every day. That's an ongoing tactic. And so that shows up when we put the due dates by week. Then what happens is it creates a cadence for us that says, here's what's due this week. And by default, it's what matters most. This is how it reduces your stress because not everything's equal in terms of activity. And so you now know what matters most. This is how you win the week. You start with that weekly plan, if you will, which is a 1/12 slice of the 12-week plan. It doesn't contain everything you do in your job. It's just the things due this week from the 12-week plan. But by default, that's the most important stuff. So that's what you build your week around. That's what you time block around. That's what you're checking into daily so that at the end of the week, you've got those activities completed. And there will be all kinds of things that pull you off course. That's why it needs to be written. A plan between your ears versus a plan written are two very different beasts. Right? I saw one study that says even if you know what you need to do, if you write it down, the probability of you doing it is 80% higher. That's huge. That's not a little bit. And so that's why, we subscribe to a 12-week written plan. And then that weekly plan is not something I create from scratch every week. It's just sort of picking out of that 12-week plan what's due this particular week. And that is what drives my week.
And you mentioned time blocking. I'm curious, how much of your daily to-do list is just written on, I use the Full Focus Planner, but in a planner somewhere versus how much of your action items actually get put on the calendar for time blocking?
So there's a difference between a weekly plan and a to-do list. I have a to-do list. I have a clear plastic holder that has my 12-week plan on one side, has my weekly plan on the other. I have a separate to-do list in the middle. The to-do list is all the I would call it kind of mid-level, lower-level stuff. The 12-week plan is what drives my week. And so that's what I calendarize. I make sure when I pull that thing at the beginning of the week, we have software. So I just go in and I just print it out, and then I calendarize that stuff. So if this is what's most important this week, when's it happening? And then I let the rest of the week fill in around it, all the other to-dos, if you will, knowing that I'm going to get to the end of the week and some of that stuff's not going to be done because there's always going to be more to do than you have time to. But that's okay because the big rocks got done. The plan items got done. So I treat my 12-week plan, my weekly plan, and my to-do list very differently. My to-do list, if I get to it, fine. My weekly plan is what drives my week.
And then let's talk about measurement. I think that's so good. So we have our weekly plan. It drives our week. We have our big rocks. They're time blocked. Let's talk about review. How do you actually measure whether or not you accomplished what you want to accomplish? And then how do you plan ahead for the week ahead? What do you do in between weeks?
Yeah, so there's an after-action review after every week. I do mine Monday morning first thing. And that is first thing I do is I go back and I score my execution of the things that were due, what got done. Was I consistent with it? And then I'm going to look at the results I got as well. And so, I score the execution, I track the results, and in those two numbers is everything I need to know. Because if there's a breakdown, in other words, I'm not on track with my results, it's one of two areas. It's either in the plan itself, I don't have the right tactical plan, or it's in the execution, I'm just not doing it. And guess where it is most of the time? Execution.
Yeah.
Right? Probably 80, 90% of the time. But most people want to change the plan, partly because it's easier and partly because they don't have a way to pinpoint the breakdown. That's why we score the execution, track the results. And so you'll know where the breakdown is on a weekly basis. And you'll never go more than 12 weeks before you stop the world and do a significant after action review and learn from it and lock and load for the next 12 weeks. So that weekly cadence is starting out with a weekly plan that defines what matters most for the week, blocking those activities in my calendar, meeting with a couple of peers in what we call a WAM. And then at the end of that week, go back and assess my outcomes and my actions. But most importantly, my actions, because that's what I can control. Did I execute at a high enough level? And by the way, Doug, with thousands of people on the system, what we found is you don't need to be perfect. If you're averaging about 80% on the execution, week in and week out, in most cases, you'll accomplish the goals. And that's true for individuals. It's true collectively for teams as well.
So you kind of alluded to this already, but what do you do when you start getting close to that 12th week? What does the transition look like from one 12-week period to the next?
Well, we take a 13th week, and that's the week where we really carve out some time. We take our team off site. We go for a day and a half, and the first half of day one is a review of the past 12 weeks, right? What worked, what didn't work, where were we on, where were we off, what's changed in the marketplace, what can we learn from that? And even if we've had a really rough 12-week year, it's never about beating ourselves up because we can't change the past, but we can learn from it. So what is the data telling us? How well did we execute? What if we had executed a little better? What do we know now that we didn't in week 5 or week 2 or week 1 when we set the plan, right? And then we'll take that learning and we'll reconnect with the vision, and then we'll lock and load for the next 12 weeks. So we'll set the goals and build the plan for the next 12 weeks. So part of that cadence is every 13th week, we're reviewing the past 12 weeks, we're locking and loading for the next 12 weeks. And then, important piece, we celebrate the progress and celebrate the success, which especially as an organization, the 12-week year provides you a lot more opportunities to do that. And what you celebrate creates energy, creates focus, creates culture. And so you've got more opportunities to do that. And sometimes, it's been a tough 12 weeks and there's not a lot of success to celebrate, but there's progress nonetheless to celebrate.
Have you seen any really unique ways or great ways for individuals or teams to celebrate that really energize people?
Yeah, individuals, it's all over the board, right? Because sometimes it's just buying something that you wanted, and you sort of set that out as a carrot, and then you celebrate with that purchase. For teams, it's usually some type of activities. It can be, we've seen teams do paintball, we've seen them do cruises, we've seen them do all kinds of fun stuff. And so usually what we tell people, look, if you're not the creative one, find the party person on your team and let them plan the celebration, because they'll come up with something every 12 weeks that's fun and it's exciting and that people really enjoy.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into the lightning round, obviously people aren't going to just be able to execute on the 12-week year just from listening to this podcast, but maybe you whetted their appetite. I know you've developed a lot of resources. You talked about you work with organizations through this framework. Where can people find you? And if they want to take a next step or get access to some of the resources you created, where can they go?
Yeah, 12weekyear.com. And if you want, you can go 12weekyear.com/getting started, and you'll get 3 emails from me. That's kind of a getting started course to get you going with this. But that's where you can find, we do everything from, online training to individual one-on-one coaching.
Anything else you want to say about the book or accountability?
The other place is Uncommon Accountability. You can find that book, some resources on that site. That book's available at all the booksellers. And that's about it.
All right. And we'll include links to all of that in the show notes. And so now it's time to dive into the lightning round, just a bunch of fun questions that I ask in every interview. And the first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
Well, so I had worked for this gentleman. We were a $1 billion company. He and his brother owned it. And it was one of many they owned. And they owned high-rise buildings. They were developing an island in Florida and stuff like that. Wow. And I remember asking him, what he thought was the one characteristic that contributed to his success the most. And he said, Brian, I recover well. He said, everybody gets knocked down, I get up faster. And that's been a great piece of advice because, right, it's all mindset. He had a much different mindset. Most people are surprised when it doesn't work out. He was like, I'm expecting it, and he was up faster and after it.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of things that, I'm spirit based, so it'd probably be something around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less?
Best purchase I've made for $100 or less. We've made a ton of purchases because we recently moved, but very few of them were $100 or less. It'd probably be a book I bought. I mean, I can't think of anything else that would. It's not a pair of shoes or something like that. So
yeah, that's my next question. So, what's a book either recently or all time that's made a significant impact on your life that you would recommend everyone to read?
The book I really love is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. It's a short little book by Dr. Susan Jeffers. It was out of print for a while. I think it's back in print. But she just did some research on, successful people versus everyone else and found that successful people still have fear and anxiety when they're trying new things, but they don't let it stop them. And so it's just a really powerful book, again, around mindset.
You're an author, and it sounds like almost an accidental author, right? You self-published and didn't know it would blow up, and now you're everywhere. What advice would you give to aspiring authors, and what is being an author done for you?
Being an author has done a ton. I mean, we're in 15 languages. It's taken me around the world and created some amazing experiences and things like that. My advice would be that, I think 83% of at least Americans would like to write a book. Most of them won't. Don't be one of the ones that don't, right? We wrote ours in 12 weeks. So don't worry about getting it perfect. Schedule time each day. Separate the starting from finishing. And what I mean by that is if you're going to write for an hour or two every day, don't put pressure on yourself to write an entire chapter, whatever. If you write a paragraph, you write a paragraph. If you write 10 pages, you write 10 pages, right? Just sit down and write and schedule that, block that out and do it consistently. And, if you haven't written before, don't worry about getting it right the first time. Just get it out on paper. What makes for a good book is when you go back and you edit it. That's where the real book is written, is in the editing by you. And so just get in the process of writing every day or in these periodic blocks, and you'll have that thing done before you know it. By the way, we have 12-week year for writers. There's a whole book we have out on that. We teamed up with a professor who actually came to us and said, "Hey, I'm putting this book together on how to write a book, and I want to use the 12-week year as a framework because it works so effectively for me." So that is out there as well, 12-week year for writers. So that'd be my best advice. Get that book. It gives you a process and walks you through it.
Did you write the book in 12 weeks intentionally, or did that just happen in that coincidentally?
It happened because that's the time we had by the time we decided to do it and get to the show. We had about 12 weeks and it was coming up, and we're like, okay, we got to crank through this thing. And so it was perfect, right? That's why deadlines matter. That's how the 12-week year works, right? There's a deadline there, a hard line in the sand that you say, hey, I'm going to measure my success or failure, and it causes you to behave differently.
What are you dreaming about right now?
We've been very blessed. I'm big on family, and so we've just moved. But our goals, our vision is to really scale our company, expand it more, to have a bigger impact. We've been doing coaching for a long time. We've launched accountability groups with our unique view, and they're super powerful. So we're looking at scaling that big time.
You get to spend time with a lot of leaders. I'm curious, when you get one-on-one or a dinner with a great leader, do you have a go-to question or two that you always ask?
I'm always interested in a couple things. One is their value system, because I think that overrides everything we do. It shapes the way we think. It shapes the way we act. And so I'm always interested in their value system. And then I'm also interested in the struggles, right? What was the biggest challenge or struggle that they faced and how they overcame it? Because successes are great. I'm not sure we learn from the successes as much as we learn from the challenges and some of the failures even.
So can you answer both of those for me? Let's start with the struggle. What's a struggle you've had that you had to overcome, and what did you learn from it? I
had a number of different struggles, right? My wife and I are both cancer survivors, so we've had health struggles. We've we've had financial struggles in that when we hit that recession, we were working with big corporations, and we're very small companies. So we only had a handful of those in process, and they all put it on hold. They all dried up. And so, and that selling cycle on those things, because they're big organizations, was about 18 months. And so we literally lost everything and had to decide, were we going to continue on this route, or were we going to do something different? And we made the decision to continue, but to pivot, right? So we pivoted, and within, I don't know, 18, 24 months, my income was higher than it had ever been. So wow. It was quite the experience. I wouldn't sign up to go through it again, because it was brutal at times. But learned a ton in it as well, you know.
And can you talk about your value system? I'd be curious to hear more.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm spiritual based. So, yeah. You know, for me, my worldview is God and Christ at the center. And so that shapes everything I do and the decisions I make. And it's why family is so important to me. It's why having an impact is so important to me, and making a difference. And so, you know, my routines are based on starting the morning with scripture and some quiet time, and then, you know, also prayer throughout the day.
And I'm a believer as well. I'd just be curious, have you always been a person of faith, or did that come when you were older?
Yeah, I grew up in a family that Catholic, and you know, my mom and dad taught us to believe in God, taught us why God existed, and you know, the character of God. And so, yeah, I grew up with that. It got much more personal though after college, as my wife and I, you know, we ended up in a different church and got in a small group and really grew a lot. Doug started reading the Bible, and because growing up, I wasn't really encouraged to do that. And that's what changed for me, is getting into the scripture and God's word and really understanding it, and making sense of it for me in my own life.
If you've crossed any, I don't know if you have a bucket list, but what's an experience that you've done or crossed off your bucket list that you think everyone should experience before they die?
You know what's a fun experience? And so we have horses. We have Arabian show horses. But if you've never been on a horse at a full gallop, it's a great feeling. It is an amazing feeling.
Do you have to wear a cowboy hat?
Something that's level, and just let the full rein out and go. It's a hoot.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. And do you have an item left on your bucket list that you want to do before you die?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff. You know, my wife and I, we love to travel. We want to do a lot more travel. I've got a daughter getting married this summer. My younger one is still in high school, so looking forward to grandkids. Now, I don't have a lot of control over that, but that is on the bucket list. But a lot of it is around travel and just doing stuff with friends.
Okay. And then last two questions. If you could go back and have coffee with yourself at any age, what age would that be? And what would you tell yourself that you think would have made a difference if you would have listened? A lot of people are like, hey, I would have told myself that, but I wouldn't have listened. But
yeah, I don't think I would have listened, but you know, to been in my teenage years, to just, you know, especially in teenage years, you're so self-absorbed to really realize that it's not about you. It's about contributing and serving others. And so the more I learn that, the more I employ that, the richer life gets.
And then on the other end of your life, looking back, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want your legacy to be?
Really about just a godly man, great husband, great father. Those are the important things to me. Having an impact. You know, the beauty of the 12-week year in writing the book is it's impacted millions of people, which is something I had hoped to do. Wasn't sure it would happen, but it's been an amazing thing. And so, you know, that's what our business is about today, is having an impact, making a difference. So, you know, when my dad died, at his wake, my dad was an electrician and really great guy. But there were people at his funeral and at his wake that I had never met. And I remember this one young man in tears. And I had never met him. He said, you know, your dad was my hero. And that's the kind of impact my dad had. Wow. You know, just doing what he did, being who he was, being the kind of man that he was. And so to me, that's a life well lived.
And anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
Yeah, for me as a leader, I think you have a responsibility and obligation to be the best leader you can be. And the way the organization grows is you grow as a leader. If you're not growing as a leader, it's tough to grow the organization. And so, my advice to leaders is just grow. Do everything you can to grow. Lead the way with that. Encourage your people. When I joined PepsiCo, my regional manager gave me a book to read, and it changed the course of my life in terms of got me fired up about leadership. I became a student of it, started to apply the stuff. It's why I do what I do today. And so, as a leader, you're probably leading, hopefully, for impact, not for prestige or power. If you're leading for prestige or power, go do something else. But if you're leading for impact, right? Role model that, walk that out, engage people in their growth and in your growth.
And I have to ask as we close, what was the book that your manager gave you?
1 Minute Manager.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry if I missed
it's
that.
Like 1,000 years old, but yeah, a simple little book. But you know what happened was, Doug, I read it and I started to apply it, and it had an impact. It worked. And I went, wow. And that's when I started starting to consume everything I could on leadership and high performance.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you've contributed to the high performance world. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all of your work, and I look forward to more work in the future. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for adding value to me and all the leaders that are listening to this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Absolutely. Well, hey, leader, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Brian. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find ways to connect with him and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/321. And leader, as always, I want to challenge you that if you want to 10x your growth this year, then you need to either launch or join an L3 Leadership Mastermind Group. Mastermind groups have been the greatest source of growth in my life over the last 7 years. If you don't know what they are, they're simply groups of 6 to 12 leaders that meet together on a consistent basis for at least 1 year in order to help each other grow, hold each other accountable, and to do life together. If you're interested in learning more about masterminds, go to l3leadership.org/masterminds. And as always, I like to end every episode with a quote, and I'll quote Gerald Brooks, who I quote so often in this episode. And he said this recently, I love this. He said, on some days, survival is success. Some of you need to hear that. On some days, survival is success. Well, leader, know that Laura and I love you. We believe in you. And we say it every episode, don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership. We'll talk to you next episode.